Ghazi Stadium in Kabul, Afghanistan was built in 1923. It was designed as a soccer stadium and can hold about 25,000 people. In 1941, Afghanistan and Iran played their first international matches at the stadium. In 1963, legendary jazz musician and band leader Duke Ellington played to a sold-out stadium. From 1996 to 2001, the stadium was used to punish and execute criminals and those the Taliban regime believed were breaking Muslim law. The gates would open early, before the sun had fully risen and burned off the morning haze. Crowds of people move towards the entrances. Some people mill about, trying to loiter and perhaps get away in the crowds. Others are being pushed into the stadium by armed Taliban soldiers. Not many people want to be in the stadium today. People have been gathering at the stadium, and others in the city have been told to go there. Not going is noticed. Being noticed by the Taliban is not a good thing. Today, and for days, loudspeakers on trucks and armed patrols have been announcing the events at Ghazi Stadium. Attendance is a religious duty and a moral obligation, many of the speakers say. The stands fill slowly and reluctantly as men file in first, then women and children. There are no vendors. Like the rest of Afghanistan, there is no music, no frivolity. Everyone knows why they are there. Some men start to chant prayers or threats. Religious leaders are present, lecturing people and giving the event a stamp of approval. In the center of the soccer field, an area has been cleared and a hole has been dug. A person, a woman by the way the prisoner is talking, it's hard to tell because the prisoner is covered from head to toe in canvas, cloth, whatever, and cannot see. The previously buzzing crowd goes completely silent as they lead the prisoner into the hole in the ground. No name is read. It doesn't matter. Any shred of individuality this person had has been stripped. That happened when she was sentenced. Now the charges against her are announced. In many cases, it was adultery, but could have been anything, like perhaps commenting that someone with connections deemed anti-Islam. The woman, who is not only covered from head to toe, is also bound inside it, so she can't move her arms. She is placed in the very narrow hole, about waist deep, and many times, men are chosen or dragged out of the crowd to perform the deed. The deed was clear. The woman was to be stoned. A pile of palm-sized rocks was also placed in the center of the soccer field. It was apparent to everyone as they walked into the stadium what was going to happen. Volunteers were asked to come and stone the victim. Some men rushed out, eager to prove themselves, or perhaps even from true religious zeal. Others often needed to be pulled out of the stands. Placed in the hole, the victim can't see. Not that it mattered if they did. There's no room to duck. Some people naturally try to avoid what they know is coming at them by moving back and forth like a worm, but it's only a matter of time. Unlike firing squads or mass executions elsewhere in history, punishments at Ghazi Stadium were usually carried out 1 or 2 people at a time. The power and the act's statement were made much more apparent when 1 or 2 victims were punished at a time in a large stadium on bare dirt. The executions at Ghazi Stadium and elsewhere throughout the country during the Taliban's first reign of terror, 1996 to 2001, were not blood-soaked murderous frenzies. The point of the entire process was not only to instill fear, but to teach a lesson. Not a lesson about punishment per se, but about God's retribution and the men supposedly carrying it out on earth in Afghanistan. That's not to say that every stoning, every punishment sanctioned by God was a relatively calm, stoic event. Throughout Afghanistan, people, primarily women, were subject to similar punishment, and they were not always the staged, hushed affair that the regime wanted. They were brutal, savage executions carried out by people fired up by religious fervor, misogyny, pent-up rage, and a desire to prove themselves to the Taliban. And sadly, despite Taliban promises, these types of events are still going on in Afghanistan. In 2015, during the American occupation, a woman accused of adultery was stoned and burned in a riverbed in Kabul after being accused of burning the Quran. Stonings were not the only punishments carried out in Ghazi Stadium and elsewhere around the country. Firing squads were often used, and the ancient Islamic practice of amputation for various offenses was practiced, though most of the time prisoners were given a local anesthetic while doctors removed a limb and then held it up to the crowd, which was obliged to cheer. Welcome to a day in history. Today, the brutal punishments of Taliban Afghanistan. To this day, the Taliban insist their legal system is simple and righteous. All crimes described in the Quran aren't just crimes against people or property, but against God, God's good order, and his moral code. Crimes were and are reported to religious leaders, community reporting, or to the moral police, or the ubiquitous MPVPV, or Ministry for the Propagation of Virtue and the Prevention of Vice, present in every neighborhood, who have the right to inflict punishment on the spot for offenses like a man's hair looking too Western. Within the justice system, officials played multiple roles. For instance, the man who detained you acting as a judge, and trials were usually short and to the point. Confession carried more weight than evidence, so that if you were arrested and beaten and confessed to get the beating to stop, and later evidence was presented that exonerated you, well, sometimes a person would go free. Sometimes, because they had confessed, the punishment went forward anyway. There were very few appeals. Sometimes a prisoner went from home to court to execution in the matter of a day or two, fair trial received. The clerics who ran the executions at Ghazni and at Khost and a dozen or more other stadiums and public gathering places throughout the country called the executions examples, and mercy, privacy, or delay were treated as possible corruptions of justice more than anything else. Why did that official grant mercy? Were they bribed, is what others might ask themselves, so there was no mercy. When a prisoner in the United States is executed, part of the process calls for witnesses. Most times, a victim's family will be asked if they want to attend. If they do, they are joined by officials and journalists who record what happened at the time of death, etc. They also report if there is an issue with the execution, if it went on too long, if there was a stay of execution, etc. But it's all private. If you were to tell a Taliban about this process, he might ask, why? Who is learning from this? Are potential criminals seeing this? Do the people know that the government is protecting them? Executions and punishments in Taliban Afghanistan were public for a few reasons. To teach, to show that there is no evading God's law. Deterrence through fear, to show who in the country represented God's justice on earth, and to create the feeling of consensus among the people. Sort of an, we're all in this together kind of thing. One of the interesting things about crowds at the stadiums and other official punishments, they were quiet and restrained. There was no calling for blood, etc. Officials made it clear that this was not a day of rejoicing, but of witnessing the punishment called for by the Quran and Sharia law. A somber occasion meant to remind people who was in charge, not to rally them to commit violence on their own. None of the people in the stadium had to be corralled into the stadium and into their seats. They didn't run, and perhaps some took their time or tried to find an unseen way out, but most just filed into their seats and sat down. The unwritten but well-known rules were as follows. Don't leave early, don't show sympathy, don't react too strongly, and don't speak on the way out. All designed for maximum impact. Most of the time, silence is a much better teacher than chaos. Backed up by the threat of Ghazi Stadium, people quickly learned that what the Taliban said was law. Though many of the executions and punishments in Afghanistan before 2001, and again since 2021, that have been reported on have concerned the punishment of women, it's believed that 80 to 90% of people killed or punished in Ghazi were men. That makes sense when you consider the strict rules about Afghan women being out in public, always escorted, always covered. For most Afghan women, going outside the home is yet another way to get in trouble. In a country where accusation and denunciation were used almost as hard evidence, staying out of sight can be the safest thing. What this meant was that most men were accused of crimes like theft or murder. Some, despite a glaring hypocrisy on the subject, were men caught or believed to be having sex with other men. Men led a visible life. Women led invisible lives, lives only seen from afar, opening things up for accusation, misinterpretation, and revenge. Some of the most common accusations were directed at men whom the woman or her family seemed to have rejected. Oftentimes, especially if the disappointed man were from a powerful tribe or clan, an accusation that she was a loose woman would be spread. Next thing you know, the moral police are at the door. Women leaving their husbands, women not wearing the proper clothing, women seeking an education. The list went on and on. Many, if not most, accusations against women were made out of ignorance, revenge, or jealousy, and many of them were leveled at them by other women. After all, it was illegal to gather with men unless you were in the company of relatives. Punished men were often seen committing theft or other crimes. Women were usually just suspected. Whether it's the US government, Stalin's Russia, Cuba, England, or most anywhere in the world outside the Middle East, punishments are meant to be meted out behind prison walls or far away from the prying eyes of the people. Throughout the 90s, journalists were both invited to and made their way secretly to the executions in the stadium. Quite a number were filmed. The Taliban filmed some. Both were broadcast, and people all over the world saw exactly what was happening in Kabul. The Taliban didn't deny anything. They defended it. Afghanistan made headlines in the 80s when the Soviets invaded and were then pushed out. After that, it was just another backwater that most people, at least in the United States, had barely heard of. As with other natural and man-made disasters, what continued to happen in Ghazi Stadium was reported from time to time, but not very often. It was heard about every day in Afghanistan from 1996 to 2001. The soil at Ghazi Stadium was removed in a symbolic gesture after the fall of the Taliban post 9/11. Games and other events were held there. But journalists, seeing the happy events being held on the field, could never forget what they saw there. Neither could most older people. But for a time, the stadium held happy events. That all changed in 2021 when the Taliban rushed back into power. And despite hundreds of promises made by Taliban officials that this Taliban was different from the last one, Ghazi and other stadiums throughout the country are being used to demonstrate the power of God. Reports from within Afghanistan by human rights groups, news agencies, and intelligence services tell of a resumption of public stoning, firing squads, and floggings. Once again, Afghanistan is in the grip of terror. Thank you for watching today. See you next time.